The blue light from the emergency alarms cast long shadows across the Federation Council chambers. Ambassador Jiwon stood before the massive holographic display, her hands trembling as she watched another Federation cruiser explode in silent fury against the black of space. The Kalani homeworld Verdania hung like a green jewel below the battle, but even from this distance, she could see the orange glow of fires spreading across its surface. "How many ships have we lost?" Admiral Tae-hoon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The old warrior had seen countless battles, but nothing had prepared him for this. 47 ships in the last hour, came the reply from Communications Officer Dabin. The Vorthak forces are using some kind of new weapon technology. Our shields are useless against it. Jiwon closed her eyes and tried to block out the sounds of dying crews crackling through the comm channels. The Kalani were healers, gardeners of the galaxy who had never raised a weapon against anyone. Their world was covered in forests that produced medicines capable of curing diseases that had plagued other species for thousands of years. They shared their knowledge freely with anyone who asked, and now they were being slaughtered. "Incoming. Transmission from the Kalani Planetary Defense Center," Dabin announced. The main screen flickered and the face of Elder Healer Cathara appeared. The normally serene Kalani looked exhausted, her leaf-like skin dulled with stress. Behind her, Jiwon could see smoke and the frantic movement of evacuation teams. "Federation friends," Cathara said, her voice like wind through trees even in crisis. "Our orbital platforms are failing. The Vorthak ships are preparing to begin surface bombardment. We estimate 12 hours before our cities are destroyed. Admiral," Tae-hoon stepped forward. "Elder Cathara, we're doing everything we can. Our remaining fleet is regrouping for another assault." The Elder's large eyes filled with what might have been tears. "Admiral, you have been good friends to our people, but you must not sacrifice more lives for us. We understand if you must withdraw." "Never," Jiwon said firmly. "The Federation does not abandon its allies." But even as she spoke the words, another explosion lit up the tactical display. 3 more Federation ships vanished from the screen. The Vorthak Empire had been growing bolder in recent years, but this assault was different. It was systematic, overwhelming, and brutal beyond anything they had shown before. "Admiral," came a voice from the tactical station. "Long-range sensors are detecting additional Vorthak reinforcements incoming. Estimated arrival in 4 hours. Tae-hoon slammed his fist against the command console. "Where are the crystalline collective ships? The ethereal consciousness promised support." "The collective is still debating the matter," Dabin reported. "The ethereals say they need more time to consider the implications." Jiwon felt her heart sink. This was the problem with the Federation. Too many species thought too much and acted too little. By the time the various councils and collectives made their decisions, there would be nothing left of Verdania but ash and memories. "Admiral," the tactical officer called out. "I'm receiving an automated distress beacon. It's broadcasting on all frequencies, including primitive radio waves." "Who still uses radio?" Tae-hoon asked, confused. "Sir, according to the database, there's only one recently discovered species still using that technology. The humans from the 3rd planet in the Sol System." Jiwon remembered the reports about Earth. The humans were a young species barely capable of interstellar travel. They had been observed for several decades but never officially contacted. The Federation had planned to make first contact within the next century, after the humans had developed more advanced technology. "Why would the beacon reach them?" she asked. "The distress signal is designed to reach anyone capable of receiving it," Dabin explained. "The humans have radio telescopes, they'll pick it up." Admiral Tae-hoon shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Even if they receive it, what could they possibly do? They don't have faster-than-light travel. They don't have energy weapons or defense shields." Another Federation ship died in a flash of light on the screen. Then another. The remaining Federation forces were falling back, trying to form a defensive line around Verdania's moon. But the Vorthak ships were cutting through them like a knife through soft wood. "Admiral," the communications officer said suddenly, "I'm receiving a response to the distress beacon." "From who?" "From Earth." The bridge fell silent except for the soft beeping of various instruments. Jiwan stared at the communication station in disbelief. Earth? How is that possible? Sir, they're using a very basic faster-than-light communication method. Crude but functional. The message is coming through now. The speakers crackled with static, and then a voice came through. It was speaking a language none of them recognized, but the universal translator quickly processed it. This is Captain Minho of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. We see what's happening to your people. We're coming to help. Admiral Taehoon looked at Jiwan with confusion. Coming to help? But they're light years away. Even if they had ships, which our reports say they don't really have, it would take them months to get here. Captain Minho, Jiwan spoke into the communicator, not sure if the human could even hear her. This is Ambassador Jiwan of the Galactic Federation. We appreciate your response, but the situation here is beyond your capabilities. The attacking force has technology far beyond what your species has developed. There was a pause filled with more static. Then Captain Minho's voice came back clearer this time. Ambassador, we may not have your advanced technology, but we have something else. We have the will to fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. Our ships may be small and our weapons may be primitive, but we're not going to sit here and watch innocent people die while we do nothing. But Captain, Admiral Taehoon interrupted, you don't understand. The Vorthak Empire has conquered dozens of worlds. They have weapons that can destroy entire planets. Your ships would be destroyed before you could even get close. Another pause. When Captain Minho spoke again, his voice carried a certainty that surprised everyone on the bridge. Admiral, maybe you're right. Maybe our ships will be destroyed, maybe we can't win this fight, but we've learned something in our history on Earth. Sometimes it's not about whether you can win. Sometimes it's about standing up and fighting because it's the right thing to do. In the background of the transmission, Jiwan could hear other voices. Human voices, all speaking rapidly in their various languages, but the translator caught fragments. People volunteering for a mission they had never trained for, to save people they had never met, in a battle they probably couldn't win. Captain, Minho, she said softly, you don't even know us. We've never made official contact with your people. Why would you risk everything for strangers? The answer came without hesitation. Because that's what you do when someone needs help. You help them. On the tactical display, another Federation ship exploded. The Vorthak forces were advancing steadily toward Verdania. Time was running out, but for the first time since the battle began, Ambassador Jiwan felt something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kalani system, like a collection of metal scraps held together by determination and prayer. Captain Minho stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the converted cargo vessel, New Hope, and watched the tactical display light up with red markers showing Vorthak positions. Captain, called out Navigator Sunmi from her station, sensors are picking up massive energy signatures around the planet. The alien ships are huge compared to ours. Minho nodded grimly. The human fleet consisted of 12 ships total. 8 were converted cargo haulers like his own, hastily fitted with the most powerful weapons Earth could manage in 72 hours. 2 were actual military vessels from Earth's small space navy. The remaining 2 were civilian research ships, whose crews had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. Communications, Minho ordered. Try to reach the Federation forces. Sir, I'm getting multiple signals. The Federation ships are scattered all around the system. It looks like they're trying to regroup behind the planet's moon. Through the main view screen, Minho could see the green world of Verdania. Even from this distance, he could see the dark smoke rising from its surface where the Vorthak had already begun their bombardment. Bright flashes marked where Federation ships were still fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. Engineering, Minho called to the back of the bridge. Hyunsu, what's our status? Engineer Hyunsu looked up from his jury-rigged control panel. Captain, the fusion reactors are running hot, but they're stable. The magnetic containment is holding. If we overload them like we discussed, we'll get maybe 10 minutes of full power before the whole ship becomes a very big bomb. That might be all we need, Minho replied. He activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to engage an enemy that has better ships, better weapons, and more experience than us. But they don't have what we have. He paused, looking around at his crew. These were cargo pilots, mechanics, scientists, and a handful of military personnel who had never expected to fight in an interstellar war. They don't understand why anyone would travel across the galaxy to fight for strangers. They don't understand why we're here. That confusion is going to be our advantage. Incoming transmission from one of the Federation ships, Communications Officer Jae-hoon announced. The voice of Admiral Tae-hoon filled the bridge, crackling with static. Human vessels. This is Admiral Tae-hoon. You need to turn around immediately. The Vorthak have weapons that will tear your ships apart. Admiral, this is Captain Minho. We appreciate the warning, but we didn't come all this way just to watch. What's the tactical situation? There was a pause before Tae-hoon replied. The Vorthak have 67 ships in the system. They're using some kind of energy weapon that penetrates our shields. We've lost 70% of our fleet. We're preparing for a final defensive action around the moon. Understood, Admiral. We're going to try something different. Captain Minho, with respect, what could 12 small ships possibly do against such a force? Minho smiled grimly. We're going to be unpredictable. He switched to the fleet communication channel. All ships, this is New Hope. Remember, we're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're trying to buy time and cause confusion. Sunmi, take your squadron and use the asteroid belt. Make them think we have more ships than we do. Pilot Sunmi's voice came through clearly from her fighter. Understood, Captain. My pilots are ready. Hyunsu, are the cargo ships ready for Operation Kinetic? All 4 ships have their reactors rigged to overload on command. The pilots know they have to eject before detonation. Good. Remember, everyone, we're not heroes trying to die gloriously. We're problem solvers trying to save lives. Use your brains, not just your weapons. The human fleet split into 3 groups. Sunmi led 4 converted fighters into the asteroid belt, their small size allowing them to hide among the rocks. The military ships moved to support the Federation forces directly. The cargo ships, loaded with Hyunsu's improvised weapons, began a seemingly random approach toward the Vorthak formation. The first Vorthak ship to detect the humans fired immediately. The energy beam that could slice through Federation shields hit the lead cargo ship and bounced harmlessly off its crude but effective armor plating. Captain, Jae-hoon called out excitedly, their primary weapons aren't working on our ships. Of course not, Hyunsu said with satisfaction. Their weapons are designed to penetrate energy shields. We don't have energy shields. We have 3 feet of solid steel armor welded around everything important. The Vorthak formation began to shift, clearly confused by ships that their main weapons couldn't easily destroy. They switched to kinetic weapons, but the human ships were already moving unpredictably, using gravity wells and magnetic fields in ways that seemed random, but were actually carefully calculated. This is Sunmi, came the voice from the asteroid belt. We've got 6 Vorthak ships chasing us through the rocks. They're having trouble with their big ships maneuvering in tight spaces. Keep them busy, Minho replied. Then he switched to the Federation frequency. Admiral Tae-hoon, this is Captain Minho. We've got their attention. Now would be a good time for your ships to hit them from behind. But Captain, our weapons aren't effective against their shields. Admiral, you're thinking like a military commander. Think like someone who has to solve impossible problems with whatever tools you have. What do you have that isn't a weapon? There was a long pause. Then Tae-hoon's voice came back with new energy. We have mining equipment on our support ships, industrial lasers designed to cut through asteroid rock. And what are those Vorthak ships made of? Metal and composite materials. Another pause. Captain, you're suggesting we use mining tools as weapons. I'm suggesting you use everything you have to protect innocent people. There's a difference. The tide of battle began to shift as Federation ships powered back up from positions where they had been hiding and damaged. The Vorthak found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of space combat they understood. Human cargo ships rammed into Vorthak vessels, their crews ejecting at the last second as overloaded fusion reactors turned their ships into kinetic weapons. Sunmi's fighters led enemy ships into asteroid fields where they became sitting targets for Federation mining lasers. The Vorthak formation designed for overwhelming firepower against conventional enemies, began to break apart in confusion. "Captain," Jehun reported, "I'm picking up communications between the Vorthak ships. The translator says they're confused about our tactics. They keep asking their commanders what these new ships are doing." "Good," Minho replied. "Fear and confusion are force multipliers when you're outnumbered." On the main screen, a Vorthak heavy cruiser was trying to target the New Hope when Sunmi's fighter squadron emerged from behind a large asteroid and hit it with everything they had. The cruiser's shields flared and died under the concentrated fire. "This is Admiral Taehun to all Federation ships," came the voice over the communications. "The humans are showing us something important. We've been fighting this war like it was a formal duel. But this isn't a duel. This is survival. All ships adopt human tactics, use everything you have. All ships," Minho broadcast on all frequencies. "Remember why we're here. Every Vorthak ship we stop is another city on that planet that doesn't burn tonight." As if in response to his words, the scattered Federation forces began to fight with a fury that surprised everyone, including themselves. Ships that had been retreating turned around and charged back into battle. Damaged vessels that should have been destroyed continued fighting with backup systems and emergency power. The Vorthak, who had expected to complete their conquest within hours, found themselves locked in a battle that they were no longer certain they could win. And deep in space, more ships were emerging from hyperspace. Not human ships, but vessels from other Federation worlds, drawn by reports of the impossible battle taking place at Verdania. The galaxy was beginning to take notice. Dr. Yuna stepped out of the medical shuttle onto the surface of Verdania, and the first thing that hit her was the smell of smoke mixed with something sweet like flowers. The Kalani city around her was a mixture of destruction and impossible beauty. Buildings that looked like they had grown from the ground itself stood next to craters where Vorthak bombs had fallen. "Doctor," called Medical Officer Dong Yun as he helped carry wounded Kalani from the rescue ships. "We have 47 injured here and more coming in every hour." Yuna nodded and moved to the nearest wounded Kalani. The alien looked like a walking tree, with bark-like skin and leaves growing from her head instead of hair. Her large eyes were filled with pain, and one of her arms was badly burned. "Can you understand me?" Yuna asked gently, hoping the universal translator would work. The Kalani's eyes focused on her. "You are human. You came to help us." "Yes. We're going to take care of you." As Yuna worked, she became aware that other Kalani were gathering around her medical station. They were not just watching, they were studying everything she did. When she applied a bandage, they took notes. When she gave medicine, they asked questions. Elder healer Kithara approached, moving slowly despite her obvious exhaustion. "Dr. Yuna, your people fight for us in space while you heal us on the ground. This is not normal behavior for a warrior species." "We're not warriors," Yuna replied, not looking up from her patient. "We're just people who don't like seeing others get hurt. In 10,000 years of galactic history, no species has ever fought for another without asking for something in return. Yet your people ask for nothing." Yuna finally looked up at the elder. "What could we possibly want from you? You're gardeners and healers. We're here because it's the right thing to do." The elder was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change the course of the war. "Dr. Yuna, there are things my people have never shared with other species. Secrets of healing and growth that we have kept for ourselves. But your people have shown us something we have never seen before." "What's that?" "True kindness. Kindness without purpose except to help." The elder gestured to several other Kalani who had been standing nearby. "These are our master healers. They want to share our knowledge with you." Over the next few hours, as the battle continued in space above them, something extraordinary happened on the surface of Verdania. The Kalani began teaching human medics secrets of healing that they had guarded for millennia. Plants that could regrow damaged tissue in minutes. Medicines that could cure diseases thought to be impossible to heal. Techniques for growing food in environments where nothing should be able to live. "Why are you showing us this?" Yuna asked as she watched a Kalani healer demonstrate how to use a particular plant to heal burns instantly. Because you have shown us something more valuable than our secrets, the healer replied. You have shown us what it means to act without selfishness. Meanwhile, in the orbital battle, Captain Minho was coordinating with Admiral Taehoon as more Federation ships arrived in the system. But they were not just Federation ships. Species that had never been seen in Federation space were appearing, as well. Captain, Communications Officer Jae-hoon announced, I'm receiving a transmission from something called the Crystalline Collective. They say they want to speak with you personally. The main screen flickered, and a being that looked like living crystal appeared. Its voice resonated like music when it spoke. Human Captain Minho, I am speaker for the collective. We have observed your actions in this system with great interest. Speaker, we could use any help you can provide. The people of this world don't deserve what's happening to them. That is exactly why we are here. Your species displays behavior that we have not observed in 50,000 years of existence. You fight for others as if they were your own family. They are our family, Minho replied simply. All thinking beings are family. The crystalline being seemed to shimmer with surprise. This concept is unknown to us. Please explain. When someone is in trouble, you help them. When someone is hurt, you heal them. When someone is threatened, you protect them. It doesn't matter if they look like you or think like you. What matters is that they need help. And you expect nothing in return? We expect them to do the same for others when they can. That's how families work. The speaker was quiet for several moments. Then the collective ships began moving into attack positions alongside the human and Federation forces. We wish to learn more about this concept of universal family. We will fight beside you. Down on the planet's surface, Commander Jiho was leading a ground assault against Vorthak forces that had landed near one of the main Kalani cities. The humans worked alongside Federation troops, but it was clear that the human approach to ground combat was different from what the other species expected. Commander, called Federation Captain Veltar, the Vorthak have superior positions on the high ground. Standard tactics say we should call for orbital bombardment. Standard tactics would destroy half the city, Jiho replied. We need to get those civilians out first. But that will take hours. The Vorthak will have time to bring in reinforcements. Then we'll deal with the reinforcements when they get here. But we're not going to win this war by becoming like them. What happened next surprised everyone. Federation soldiers who had been following military protocol began adopting human tactics. Instead of focusing only on destroying the enemy, they started focusing on protecting civilians. Instead of trying to win quickly, they started trying to win right. The Kalani civilians noticed, as human and Federation soldiers worked together to evacuate families from dangerous areas. The rescued Kalani began helping in return. They shared knowledge of secret tunnels under the city. They provided food and medicine. They offered information about Vorthak movements. Commander Jiho, came a voice over the communicator. It was Captain Minho from orbit. We're receiving reports from all over the planet. Wherever human forces are fighting, the local population is joining the resistance. They're not joining because we're winning, Jiho replied. They're joining because they trust us to do the right thing. Above the planet, the tide of battle was turning decisively. The Vorthak Empire, faced with enemies who seemed to grow stronger the longer the fight continued, began to make mistakes. Ships that had been holding formation broke off to pursue individual targets. Commanders who had been following careful battle plans started making desperate attacks. Captain, Sunmi reported from her fighter, the Vorthak are retreating to the edge of the system. But they're not leaving, they're regrouping. Let them regroup, Minho replied. Every hour they wait is another hour for more help to arrive. And help was arriving. Ships from dozens of species were emerging from hyperspace. Many were species that had never been involved in Federation politics before. They came because word was spreading through the galaxy at the speed of subspace communications. There was a species that fought not for conquest or resources, but simply to protect others. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The news traveled faster than the speed of light through quantum communication networks that connected every civilized world in the galaxy. In council chambers and meeting halls across thousands of planets, the same conversation was happening, over and over again. They did what? The humans. They traveled across the galaxy to fight for a species they had never met before. That makes no sense. What do they gain from this? According to all reports, nothing. They ask for nothing in return. On the water world of Aquatica, the dolphin-like cetacean council called an emergency session. These ancient beings rarely concerned themselves with the affairs of land-dwelling species, but the reports from Verdania had captured their attention. Council Speaker Delphus, said one of the younger members, should we not investigate these humans ourselves? The cetaceans have survived for 50,000 years by avoiding the conflicts of other species, the speaker replied with caution. But this is not a conflict between species. This is one species protecting another for no reason except kindness. The council fell into the deep harmonic discussion that was their way of making important decisions. Hours later, they reached a conclusion that surprised even themselves. Send a delegation to meet these humans. Meanwhile, in Federation space, Captain Minho found himself in command of the largest combined fleet in galactic history. Ships from over 30 different species had arrived at Verdania, all wanting to see these humans who fought for strangers. Captain, Ambassador G1 said as she joined him on the bridge of New Hope, I need to warn you about something. Some of these species have never worked together before. The thermal beings from Furnace World can't be on the same ships as the ice crystals from Frozen Moon. Their environmental needs are completely opposite. Then we'll figure out how to make it work, Minho replied. People said humans and Kalani couldn't work together either, but Dr. Yuna is down there right now learning to grow medicine that could feed half the galaxy. It's not that simple, Captain. The quantum entities exist partially outside normal spacetime. They communicate through probability waves. How do you give tactical orders to a being made of living math? Minho thought about this for a moment. We ask them what they're good at and then we let them do it. Same as everyone else. What followed was the most unusual military planning session in galactic history. Representatives from dozens of species gathered on various ships throughout the fleet, each contributing their unique abilities to a battle plan unlike anything ever attempted. The thermal beings offered to superheat asteroid fields, creating obstacles for Vorthak ships. The ice crystals could freeze space itself, slowing enemy vessels. The quantum entities could calculate probability paths that would let smaller ships avoid enemy fire entirely. But the most surprising contributions came from species that had never been involved in warfare at all. The Grove Mines, living forests, from a planet covered in thinking trees, offered something unprecedented. We can communicate with plant life across the galaxy simultaneously. If the Vorthak attack other worlds, we will know instantly and can coordinate defenses. The deep singers, whale-like creatures from the ocean floors of dozens of worlds, had an even more remarkable gift. We can sing songs that carry across interstellar space. Any species that hears our songs will know what is happening here. Pilot Sunmi, now commanding a squadron of mixed-species fighters, found herself learning to work with beings she could never have imagined. Her wingman was a crystalline entity that communicated through light patterns. Her navigator was a floating, jellyfish-like creature that could sense gravitational fields directly. Sunmi, came Captain Minho's voice over the communicator. How are the mixed squadrons working out? Sir, it's incredible. The crystal beings can see energy patterns that our sensors miss. The gravitational sensitives can predict enemy movements before they happen. We're not just fighting together, we're becoming something new. What do you mean? I mean, we're becoming the kind of fleet that exists in stories, the kind that saves entire civilizations. Back on Verdania, Dr. Yuna was making discoveries that would revolutionize medicine throughout the galaxy. Working with Kalani healers, she had developed treatments for diseases that had plagued dozens of species for millennia, but more importantly, she was learning about cooperation between species that had never been achieved before. Dr. Yuna, said Elder Healer Kithara as they worked together in the expanded medical facility, something has been troubling me. What's that, Elder? Your people have given us so much. Not just protection from the Vorthak, but friendship, knowledge, hope. What can we possibly give you in return? Yuna smiled as she applied a Kalani healing compound to a wounded Federation soldier. The compound would have his injuries completely healed in hours instead of weeks. Elder, you're already giving us everything we could want. I do not understand. You're letting us be part of your family. You're teaching us your ways. You're showing us wonders we never imagined. What more could anyone want? The elder considered this. On our world, we have a saying. The tree that gives shade asks nothing of those who rest beneath it. But humans are not trees. You are thinking beings who chose to give shade anyway. Maybe that's what thinking beings are supposed to do. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm from the communications station. Dr. Yuna, called Medical Officer Donghyun. We're getting reports from across the galaxy. The Vorthak are attacking other worlds. How many worlds? Dozens. It looks like they're trying to spread our forces too thin to stop them anywhere. But what the Vorthak hadn't counted on was how quickly word of their attacks would spread, and how many species were now ready to respond. The Grove Mine's instant communication network meant that every attack was known galaxy-wide within minutes. The Deep Singer's songs carried news and coordinates to species that had never even heard of the Federation. Within hours, something unprecedented happened. Species that had been neutral for thousands of years began mobilizing their fleets. Worlds that had never had military forces started building them. The galaxy was waking up, and it was angry. Captain Minho, came a transmission from Admiral Taehoon. Long-range sensors are detecting massive fleet movements throughout the galaxy. It looks like half the known species are preparing for war. Against us? Minho asked. No, Captain. With us. They're all moving toward Vorthak-controlled space. Commander Jiho, coordinating ground operations across multiple worlds now, found himself in command of the most diverse army in galactic history. He had soldiers who breathed methane fighting alongside troops who needed temperatures hot enough to melt lead. He had warriors made of living stone working with beings who were barely more solid than mist. Commander, came a report from one of his lieutenants. The Vorthak ground forces are retreating on 7 different worlds, but they're not retreating to their ships. They're retreating to defensive positions. They're preparing for a siege, Jiho realized. They think they can hold out until reinforcements arrive. Sir, what reinforcements? According to intelligence, we've accounted for most of their fleet. Jiho looked at the tactical display showing Vorthak positions across dozens of worlds. Something was bothering him about the pattern of their retreats. They weren't just defending strategic positions. They were defending. They're not waiting for military reinforcements, he said suddenly. They're waiting for evacuation ships. They're getting ready to run. The realization spread through the combined fleet within minutes. The Vorthak Empire, which had seemed unstoppable just days before, was preparing to abandon their conquest entirely. But Captain Minho made a decision that surprised even his own crew. All ships, this is New Hope. Do not pursue the Vorthak evacuation ships. Let them go. Captain, Admiral Taehoon's voice came over the communicator. This is our chance to end their threat permanently. Admiral, we didn't fight this war to destroy an enemy. We fought it to protect innocent people. The Vorthak are leaving. That's victory enough. It was a decision that would echo through galactic history. The combined fleet that could have annihilated the Vorthak Empire chose mercy instead, and the galaxy took notice of that too. 6 months after the Battle of Verdania, engineer Hyun-soo found himself in a situation he never could have imagined. He was standing in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Crystalline Collective, surrounded by beings made of living crystal and light, trying to explain human engineering principles to some of the most advanced minds in the galaxy. The concept is simple, he said, gesturing to the holographic display showing a human fusion reactor. We don't try to control every aspect of the reaction. We build it to be stable enough to handle small problems on its own. The lead crystal, engineer, a being whose name sounded like musical chimes, asked, "But how do you account for quantum fluctuations in the containment field?" "We don't," Hyun-soo replied. "We build the reactor strong enough that small fluctuations don't matter." The crystal beings exchanged light patterns that indicated confusion. This approach seems inefficient. Why not calculate and control every variable? Because, Hyunsu said with a smile, sometimes the best solution isn't the perfect solution. Sometimes the best solution is the one that works even when everything goes wrong. It was a conversation being repeated across the galaxy in 1,000 different forms. Human approaches to problems were spreading through civilizations that had spent millennia perfecting their own methods. The humans didn't have better technology, but they had something else entirely. They had a different way of thinking about problems. On the garden world of New Verdania, Dr. Yuna was working with a team that included healers from dozens of species. The medical facility they had built together was unlike anything that had existed before. Kalani plant-based medicines worked alongside crystalline energy healing. Thermal being heat treatments were combined with ice crystal preservation techniques. Dr. Yuna, said her assistant medical officer Dong-hyun, we've received another request for medical training. This one is from the Void Walkers. Yuna looked up from the patient she was treating, an injured soldier from a species she had never seen before the war. The Void Walkers? Didn't they refuse all contact with other species for over 1,000 years? Yes, but apparently they've been monitoring our medical broadcasts. They want to learn our cooperation techniques. Not our medical techniques? No, specifically our cooperation techniques. They say they have advanced healing technology, but they've never learned to work with other species effectively. It was happening everywhere. Species across the galaxy were adopting what they called human methods, but what they really meant was cooperation, flexibility, and the willingness to help others even when it wasn't profitable. The Ethereum consciousness, beings of pure energy who existed in the spaces between stars, had manifested physical avatars for the first time in recorded history just to speak with humans. They appeared as shifting patterns of light when they met with Commander Jiho at the Federation headquarters. Commander Jiho, the lead entity said, its voice like the sound of solar wind. We have observed countless species rise and fall over millions of years. None have ever made their neighbors stronger by existing among them. We're not trying to make anyone stronger, Jiho replied. We're just trying to help when help is needed. But that is exactly what makes you unique. Most species take from their environment. Some species give back to their environment. But humans seem to improve everything around them simply by being present. I think you're giving us too much credit. Are we? Since humans began working with the Kalani, their medicine has advanced by thousands of years. Since humans began coordinating with the crystalline collective, their efficiency has improved by 30%. Every species that works with humans becomes more than they were before. Jiho thought about this. Maybe it's not that we make others better. Maybe it's that working together makes everyone better. This concept of working together is not new, Commander, but the human approach to cooperation is unprecedented. You do not seek to dominate partnerships. You do not require others to become like you. You simply enhance what they already are. Meanwhile, Pilot Sunmi had become something she never expected to be. She was a teacher. Her classroom was a modified space station where pilots from 47 different species came to learn what they called human combat philosophy. The key to effective space combat, she explained to a class that included beings made of gas, creatures that existed in 4 dimensions, and robots with artificial intelligence, is not to follow a predetermined plan. The key is to adapt to whatever the situation requires. A student who looked like a floating collection of metal spheres asked, "But how do you adapt without losing coordination with your allies?" You trust them to adapt too. You trust that everyone is working toward the same goal, and you trust them to figure out their own best way to reach that goal. Another student, this one resembling a living plant with rockets attached, said, "This requires enormous faith in others." Yes, it does. But that faith is usually rewarded. People tend to live up to the trust you place in them. The lessons weren't just about combat. They were about something deeper. They were about building relationships based on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than hierarchy and control. Back on Earth, Captain Minho found himself dealing with a problem he had never anticipated. The human homeworld had become the most popular destination in the galaxy. Thousands of species wanted to visit, to learn, to understand what made humans different. "Captain," said Communications Officer Jaehoon, "we have 17 different species requesting permission to establish embassies on Earth. The Kalani want to plant a memorial forest. The Crystalline Collective wants to build a research facility. The Deep Singers want to create an ocean preserve. What do our people think about all this attention? Most humans are excited about meeting so many different species, but some are worried about Earth being changed by all the alien influence." Minho understood the concern. Earth was a small planet, and the sudden attention from thousands of advanced civilizations could easily overwhelm human society. "Here's what we're going to do," he decided. "We're going to approach this the same way we approach everything else. We're going to figure out how to make it work for everyone." The solution they developed became known as the Earth Accords. Instead of allowing unlimited development by alien species, Earth would host cultural and educational exchanges. Species could establish small facilities, but only if they contributed something beneficial to human society and respected human customs and environment. The result was something remarkable. Earth became the galaxy's first truly multicultural world. Human children grew up learning alongside young Kalani, crystalline beings, and dozens of other species. Human adults worked on projects that combined the best knowledge from hundreds of worlds. But perhaps most importantly, Earth became a symbol of something the galaxy had never seen before. It became a place where being different was not just tolerated but celebrated. The Vorthak Empire, watching from their distant territories, couldn't understand what was happening. Their spies reported that humans had no central authority controlling their expansion into galactic society. They had no master plan for galactic domination. They seemed to be making decisions based on what would help the most people, rather than what would benefit humanity the most. "It makes no strategic sense," reported one Vorthak intelligence officer. "They are giving away advantages they could use to control other species." "Perhaps," replied the Vorthak High Command, "that is exactly why other species trust them." As the first year after Verdania came to an end, something unprecedented happened in galactic politics. For the first time in recorded history, a species was unanimously invited to join the Galactic Council, not as a junior member working their way up, but as a senior member with full authority. The invitation was delivered by Ambassador Jiwan herself, now representing not just the Federation but the combined interests of over 100 species. "Captain Minho," she said during the formal ceremony, "humanity is being offered a position that typically takes a species thousands of years to earn." "Ambassador," Minho replied, "we don't want a position of authority over other species. That is exactly why you're being offered it." The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, watched by trillions of beings on thousands of worlds. But the most memorable moment came not from any formal speech, but from Captain Minho's response to the honor being offered to humanity. "We accept this invitation not as a reward for what we've done, but as a responsibility for what we hope to do. We hope to continue helping others. We hope to continue learning from our friends throughout the galaxy. And we hope to continue showing that the best way to be strong is to make others strong too." The applause that followed lasted for hours and could be heard on worlds light years away. 25 years after the Battle of Verdania, Ambassador Soyan stood in the Great Hall of First Contact, preparing to welcome the galaxy's newest discovered species to the galactic community. The hall itself was a marvel that represented everything humanity had helped build. Walls grown by Kalani plant shapers rose toward a ceiling of living crystal created by the Crystalline Collective. The floor was made from materials that existed partially outside normal space-time, contributed by the quantum entities. But what made the hall truly special wasn't its construction. It was what it represented. For the first time in galactic history, first contact with a new species wasn't about determining their usefulness or potential threat. It was about welcoming them into a family that now spanned half the known galaxy. "Ambassador Soyan," said her aide, a young Kalani named Wind Whisper whose leaves shimmered with excitement. The delegation from the Singing Stone people has arrived. They're quite nervous about the ceremony. Soyeon smiled. The Singing Stone people were living rock formations from a planet near the galactic rim. They had been discovered by a joint human crystalline exploration team and had spent the past year learning about galactic civilization through careful, patient communication. Let them know that today is about celebration, not judgment, Soyeon replied. They're already part of the family. This ceremony is just making it official. As she spoke, Soyeon looked out through the great transparent wall of the hall. Beyond it, she could see a sight that would have been impossible to imagine when she was young. The space around the station was filled with ships from hundreds of different species, all gathered for the same purpose. They had come not because they had to, but because they wanted to be part of something that had become bigger than anyone had ever dreamed. The ceremony began with the traditional songs of welcome. The deep singers provided the bass notes that could be felt rather than heard. The thermal beings created light displays that painted the entire hall in shifting colors. The Grove Mines contributed scents that told stories of growth and friendship. But the most moving part of the ceremony came when Elder Healer Cathara, now ancient but still serving as one of the galaxy's moral guides, stepped forward to speak. Singing, "Stone friends," she said, her voice carrying the wisdom of centuries. "We welcome you not as subjects or allies, but as family. You join a community that began with a simple idea. The idea that when someone needs help, you help them." The Singing Stone delegation responded with harmonics that resonated through the station's hall. Their translator rendered their words as, "We have heard the stories of this community across the void between stars. We wish to learn what it means to be part of something greater than ourselves." "You already know," came a familiar voice from the back of the hall. Captain Minho, now gray-haired but still commanding respect wherever he went, moved through the crowd toward the delegation. "You know because you chose to join us instead of staying isolated on your world. That choice is what makes someone family." After the formal ceremony, as representatives from dozens of species mingled in the reception area, Soyeon found herself in conversation with a group of young beings who had been born after the Battle of Verdania. To them, the galactic community they lived in seemed natural and normal. "Ambassador," said a young crystalline entity whose light patterns indicated curiosity, "is it true that before humans joined the galaxy, most species didn't work together?" "It's true," Soyeon confirmed. "Most species were either neutral toward each other or actively hostile." "But that doesn't make sense," said a young Kalani, whose leaves were still bright with youth. "How did they solve big problems without cooperation?" "They didn't usually. Big problems just stayed unsolved until they became catastrophes." A young human in the group, a girl who had grown up with alien friends as normal parts of her life, asked, "Why didn't they try to help each other?" Soyeon thought carefully about her answer. "I think it was because they hadn't learned yet that helping others makes everyone stronger. They thought strength meant being better than others instead of making others better." "That sounds lonely," observed the young crystalline being. "It was lonely. That's why what we have now is so precious." Across the reception hall, Dr. Yuna, now the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies medicine and cooperation, was deep in conversation with researchers from the newest species. At 87 years old, she had spent more than half her life working with alien colleagues, and the medical advances they had achieved together had eliminated diseases that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. "Dr. Yuna," said one of the Singing Stone researchers, "we have studied your early papers about human medicine. Your techniques were quite primitive compared to what you use now." Yuna laughed. "They were primitive compared to what we use now. But that's the beautiful thing about cooperation. None of us are the same as we were when we started working together. We all became better than we could have been alone. Is this what humans call growth? This is what everyone calls growth when they're willing to learn from each other." Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the hall, Engineer Hyunsu was demonstrating a piece of technology to a group of fascinated aliens. The device looked simple, but it incorporated principles from dozens of different species' scientific traditions. This is a standard multi-environmental life support unit, he explained. It can maintain breathable conditions for over 200 different species simultaneously. How is this possible? Asked a being that resembled a floating jellyfish. Our scientists said such a device would require technology that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in any one species' technology, Yunsu replied. But when you combine Kalani bioregulation with crystalline energy management, add thermal being temperature control and ice crystal preservation, then tie it all together with human adaptive engineering, you get something none of us could build alone. So the device itself is a form of cooperation? Everything we build together is a form of cooperation. As the reception continued, word came through the galactic communication network that exemplified how much the galaxy had changed. The Vorthak Empire, which had retreated to the edge of known space after their defeat at Verdania, had sent a message to the Galactic Council. They wanted to talk about joining the galactic community. The message was brief. We have observed the changes in the galaxy over the past 25 years. We have seen species working together to solve problems that seemed impossible. We have seen former enemies become allies. We have seen the weak become strong through cooperation rather than conquest. We wish to learn if there is a place for us in this new galaxy. The response was immediate and unanimous. Of course there was a place for them. There was always a place for anyone willing to help others and be part of something bigger than themselves. Captain Minho, when asked for his thoughts on the Vorthak request, gave an answer that became one of the most quoted statements in galactic history. We didn't defeat the Vorthak Empire to destroy it. We defeated it to show it a better way. If they're ready to learn that better way, then we're ready to teach it. As the day ended and representatives from hundreds of species began returning to their home worlds, Ambassador Soyan stood again at the great transparent wall, looking out at the stars. Elder healer Kethara joined her there. Elder, Soyan said, do you ever think about how different things might have been if humans had never come to Verdania? The ancient Kalani considered the question carefully. I think about it often. The galaxy would be darker, lonelier, and smaller. But more than that, I think each species would be less than they are now. What do you mean? Before humans, we Kalani were healers, but we only healed our own. The Crystalline Collective were builders, but they only built for themselves. The Deep Singers were storytellers, but they only told stories to other Deep Singers. Humans taught us all to be more than we were. How did we do that? By showing us that the best way to be strong is to make others strong. By demonstrating that the best way to be great is to help others become great. By proving that true power comes not from what you can take, but from what you can give. Soyan thought about her own life. She had been born into a galaxy where humans were unknown. She would die in a galaxy where human influence had helped create something unprecedented in cosmic history. A community of thousands of species working together as equals. Elder, do you think this will last? This cooperation, this community? Ambassador, I have lived for over 400 years. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have seen species go extinct and new species evolve. But I have never seen anything like what exists now. What makes this different? What makes this different is that it was built on love instead of fear. It was built on giving instead of taking. And it was built by beings who understood that true strength comes from making others strong. The elder paused, her ancient eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. Your species taught the galaxy something that will echo through eternity. You taught us that legends are not made by the strong alone, but by those who make others stronger. You showed us that gratitude, when shared among enough beings, truly becomes a force of nature. As if summoned by the elder's words, other beings began joining them at the great window.